Hold the Line with Mike Solon is brought to you by the Seattle Police Officers Guild, Seattle's public safety voice, and by Heart to Heart Medical Supply. Heart to Heart is an American company offering FDA-registered respirator masks at the lowest prices. Heart to Heart offers free same-day shipping, and by using the promo code DELTA at checkout, you can receive 5% off your entire order. Visit hearttoheart.com. That's HART, the number 2, HART.com. Heart to Heart, where great masks are just a click away.
There is dried blood pouring from the passenger side. So I go, I guess the shooting happened in the car.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther. This is where we hold them. This is where we fight.
We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish. Gotta fight. Hold the line!
Hey, welcome back to Hold the Line with Mike Solon. Today in studio, I got a special guest that I admire, and his reputation precedes himself. He is probably one of the best homicide detectives SPD's ever seen. He is highly regarded, and he continues that work, albeit he is retired, but his passion is homicide investigations, and he's the author of 2 books, soon to be a 3rd, and we'll get into those in just a minute. But without further ado, Cloyd Steiger, thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for having me, Mike. No problem.
2 books.
Yeah.
What led you to want to write your first one, which is Homicide the View from Inside the Yellow Tape, which is a pretty cool title.
Yeah. You know, the thing that led me to write that book was everybody always said at the end of my career, you need to write a book. Because I'd go to events with non-cops, right?
Yeah.
Or my wife's friends or something. And, what are you doing at work today? And I'd tell them a story, and their jaws would just be hanging and watching.
Sure.
To me, I'm thinking it's just a day at work, and they're like, oh my God, you need to write a book. And everybody said that for the last 10 years. And yeah. But then when I was getting ready to retire, I have a notebook, and there's single-page sheets, and every single one of them is a summary of a murder I worked on. And it's like that thick now. And so just before I was thinking of retiring, I started leafing through it, and I thought, I'm just going to start writing a little bit, just a journal to myself about these cases, what I remember. And then it got more and more. And then a lot of it, because when I left, I had copied all my computerized files onto a hard drive and took them with me. So I had all those files. And then I got to the point where there were older cases that before we had computers, so I would order them up from the vault and scan them. And
I remember that vault.
Yeah. So then I'd get all these, then I had them, and then just one thing led to another. I wrote it about 8 different times, and then I should publish this. And so I designed the cover, came up with the title, and published it. I did, and it was like I was amazed at how well it sold, and it still sells. I still sell books. This has been it's been over 3 years. And I sell books every single day on Amazon on it.
That's fantastic.
And Barnes and Noble and stuff.
That's so cool, because you're actually, you're, I guess, talking about your career.
Right.
And it's interesting to, I think, people as a homicide is like, it's a serious thing. And
Well,
it's
true
always going to
crime's
be
hot.
captivating.
Yeah, true crime is hot. Yeah.
And your second book is Forgotten Serial Killer, Gary Gene Grant.
Right. Seattle's Forgotten Serial Killer. And I wrote that book. It was kind of weird because after somebody read my first book, they sent me a message and said, what do you know about Gary Grant? He was killing people in Renton in the late 60s, early 70s, and I'd never heard of Gary Grant. And I thought I knew all the serial killers in this area. So I called a couple places, King County Sheriff's Office and the Renton Police Department. Do you guys have files on this? His name's in our system, but we don't have anything. So then I called a friend of mine who's a paralegal in the homicide section at the prosecutor's office. I said, is there a court file on this case? And she goes, let me check. I'll call you back. And then a day or two later, she called me, yeah, we have a file. And I said, can I borrow it? She goes, sure. So I got it, and I copied it all, not with the intent to write a book.
Yeah.
And then like a week later, I'm in my car driving in Pioneer Square, and my phone rings, and it's a publisher. And they say, hey, we see you wrote that other book, the homicide book, and it's doing pretty well. We're looking for people to write books on like older murder cases or true crime. Do you have any cases you could write about? And it's like, are you kidding me? I just got this file. Well, yeah, actually I do.
The timing of that.
Yeah, it was just like almost divine, like I said. It's all of a sudden they just call me. First of all, how rare is it for a publisher to call you and ask you to write a book as opposed to you writing a book and trying to sell it to a publisher, right?
Well, how much of that is I think, the energy behind your first book. What do
Yeah,
you
it
think
might
of
be. Yeah, I'm sure that's what drew their attention
Sure.
to me. And so I said, this is what I got. And they sent me a form, fill out this proposal and send it in. I sent it to them. And a week later, they said, go ahead and write it. So I did. Matter of fact, it was funny because I was getting down to my deadline and I had to last minute drafts, and I was in a condo in Maui doing my last minute drafts to get this thing ready. And I finished it and sent the final copy from my condo in Kanapali in Maui.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, before we get too much into those books, let's tell the listenership and the viewership about who you are. I mean, I didn't even do you justice because you are a legend here in this police department. You
Just
really
ask me,
are.
I'll tell you.
That's awesome. So walk us through who you are, and then why you became a cop, or how long you've been on, and I guess your career.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I became a cop because I decided when I was 10 years old that I wanted to be a police officer. From watching like Adam 12 on TV, I thought that'd be a cool job, because I didn't want a job where I was stuck inside or anything. I wanted to be out and about. I thought that'd be a cool job. So I decided I'm going to be a police officer. And of course I told my parents, yeah, sure you are.
Right.
And then I started doing actual research, going and reading. They had books in the school library and the public library about careers in law enforcement and how to be a police. I remember they're like from New York in the 50s, and they were wearing the big wool coats and all these things about it. So I read all those, and then I continued. And as I got older and went into junior high and high school, I still did the same thing. Read every book I could find on policing. Matter of fact, I told this story before, but when I was 12 years old, I wrote a letter to the Seattle Police Department. And I said, my name is Cloyd Steiger, and I'm going to be a police officer, and I want to work for the Seattle Police Department. Could you send me any material you have about what it takes to get onto the Seattle Police Department?
You did that on your own?
I just did it on my own, yeah. And it's kind of cool because I got this letter in the mail a couple weeks later, and it was addressed to Master Cloyd Steiger. I'd never heard the word master used in that context. And inside was a nice letter and a recruiting pamphlet and everything, and talking about, and at that time they had the cadet program, and they said, when you're 18, you can become a cadet. Well, unfortunately, before I turned 18, they ended the cadet program, but but that's what I did. And so then I went through high school, and then when I graduated, went to school and majored in criminal justice, and then I got a job as an EMT on an ambulance company because I wanted to get emergency service experience. So I did that and met a lot of matter of fact, I met a lot of Medic One people and Dr. Kopitz at Harborview, who all said, you should become a medic, because they thought I was pretty good at it. You should become a medic. And I was tempted, but no, I'm going to be a police officer. So
so you had that initial drive to just, you were driven to service.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it's forward thinking to become as EMT person.
Yeah. I wanted to be,
that's a skill set.
It is a skill set. And it also helped me. Like I learned to drive emergency vehicles under emergency conditions when I was younger.
Good training.
I had a lot of contact with cops, and things like that, and made friends. I was in the South County, so I wasn't in the city here. That's where I was, and just learned a lot of skills. I did, before I ever became a police officer, I did CPR on like 30 real people. So it wasn't just on a dummy. And so it was just a good skill set. And then matter of fact, so. When I was working as an EMT when I was 20 and a half. And so that's the minimum age you had to be to apply. 20 and a half. So I called.
It's random.
I know. I just called the Seattle, because they figured 6 months worth of training and stuff, and then you'll be 21.
I get it.
So I called the Seattle Police Department and said, are you guys in a hiring process right now? And they go, yes, we are. They just started a big hiring process after years of not hiring anybody. Mm-hmm. They were in a big push. So they sent me an application and a study packet in the mail, and I took that study packet, and it was like 110 pages, and I read it over and over and over till I could almost recite it verbatim. I had memorized the entire thing, and I looked at, there were a lot of sketches and diagrams, and I just can put those all to memory. And then a friend of mine at the same time, when I was going to test, he thought on a whim, well, I should test too. So he applied. And he had a Saturday test date, and I had a Sunday test date. And he went down to the place where they're doing the test, and I waited, and several hours later he came back. I said, how was it? He goes, man, there was like 1,000 people there. And I'm like, whoa. So I went there on Sunday, and there were like another 1,000 people there taking the test to get on SPD.
It's a ton.
It's a ton. Oh my God, it was very competitive.
And how many do you think they were hiring at that time? Maybe
Well,
a couple hundred, maybe 100?
Well, they were a big hire, because I had my serial number was 4313, and they were like 45 or 46 like a couple of years later. So they were in a big hire. Yeah. And then, but they, and a few weeks later, I got well, in the meantime, I tested for, let me back up a minute. I just wanted to practice taking tests. So Auburn Police Department was testing, and you could be 19 and test for them because it was a 2-year list. So I took the test, and there was like 40 people there taking the test. And I took the test, and I went home, and the next day my phone rang, and it was a detective from Auburn. He said, we'd like to bring you in for an interview. I said, well, just to let you know, I'm only 19. He goes, what? Yeah, I just took this to have practice. I know it was a 2-year list. He goes, you're number 1 on our list.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He said, call me back. And he said, call me back when you're 21. I said, okay. But I didn't, of course, because I got hired by SPD. I didn't want to work for a small department. I wanted to work for a big department because by that time I'd gotten, my career goals had changed a little bit in that I ultimately wanted to be a homicide detective because I read a lot about that. And I thought that would be kind of a cool place. First of all, I thought it was kind of the top of the food chain.
Sure.
And then you have really interesting work and things like that. So I think that's what I wanted. That was when I got hired, that was my ultimate goal, was to be a homicide detective.
That was like the pinnacle for you.
That was the end, the ring at the end of the thing. And matter of fact, and so I thought, I looked at it, man, I may not make it because there's only so many positions.
Yeah.
I'll just do everything I can. And I knew what I had to do is I had to work really good stuff. One of my early sergeants was actually Emmett Kelsey. He told me, you want to do something, you want to make it anywhere in this department, you got to make it so people know who you are. And you do that by doing a little more than you have to and working well and writing good reports, and people will recognize you. And he says, also go outside your precinct and meet other people. Do things where you're some of the other, events. Like for example, I played football for the police department. I got to know a lot of people from that.
Okay.
Back then. Yeah.
Yeah, the Bacon Bowl. Was it the Bacon
Bowl
Bowl back
the
in the day
Bacon Bowl.
for
Yeah,
you?
I played like 11 years of that until I could barely get up off the floor. But so that's what I did, and I got to know people. And then but I was at SWAT for a while, and I had almost 10 years on, and I thought, man, if I'm going to do this detective thing, I better get moving.
The 10 years is a pretty decent amount of time in patrol.
It is.
I mean, I only did 5 in patrol.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. A lot of people do set.
That's not much. I mean, I did 5, a couple years in the gang unit as in the detective route.
Right.
And then did SWAT.
Yeah.
So I wish I would have done a little bit more time in patrol.
I know. It's easy. The thing is,
that's how you meet more people.
You do.
A ton of people. And you work a lot of overtime.
Yeah, a lot of
events.
overtime. And I worked third watch my entire career.
It's such a fun
watch. It is, until you have kids at home and you have to get up
4
constantly
hours.
after
4
3 or
hours
4
at
hours.
night,
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. And so that was a killer. That's why I need to go. So I took the detective's test. Back then there was a test you had to take to be a detective. It was a 2-section test. You had to take it over 2 different days. And I passed it, and I was on the eligibility list. Well, then you had to go find a job. And so...
network.
Yeah, you had network. And I didn't know a lot of people in detectives, but I knew a couple commanders, and I just thought, and being third watch working at night, those guys all worked during the day, so my opportunity to talk to them was less.
Day shift world.
Yeah. So then when I was downtown for court or something like that during the day, or for any reason during the day, I would go. I went up to Tom Witkowski, who was lieutenant of the detectives up at the East Precinct, and I said, "Hey Tom, I knew him. I'm a lieutenant. I call him Tom later, but I call him lieutenant then.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a job. I'm on the list. And he said, I'd love to hire you, but we're not taking. This is in January. We're not taking anybody until the summer." I said, "Okay, well, just keep me in mind." He said, "Okay." And it was like a week later, I'm at the Seattle Police Ball with my wife and a couple other cop friends. And one of the guys comes to me and says, "Hey, I see you're going to detectives." I said, "I am?" He goes, "Yeah, I just saw the orders. Your name's on it."
Amazing.
I know. And it is. This is like a week later.
It still happens to this day.
I know. So I went up to my room at the Sheraton and called the front desk at the East Precinct and said, "You have a set of orders there?" And I go, "Yeah." And is my name on it? And he goes, "Yeah, you start in the detectives on Monday." It's like, wow. It's kind of like when I got hired. I got called on a Thursday to say report on Monday to the police academy. That's
eerily familiar with my process of getting hired.
I know, it drags on and on and on.
And
all of a sudden, boom. Yeah.
Immediate.
Yeah, exactly. Immediately. And so
you did your patrol time. Where'd you do most of your patrol time?
I did, the first half I did South 3rd, and then it was East 3rd.
East 3rd. Okay. All right. The level of crime in both those precincts, was it relatively the same?
No, Now?
Well,
no, then, yes, it was comparable because it's nothing like it is now. They're all gentrified now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still crime there, but not anything like it was in the Valley back in the early 80s.
Right. It was just off the hook.
It was off the hook. Yeah, shootings all the time. And we used to call it the Rainier Valley Knife and Gun Club. And then when I went up east, the crack houses were just getting big, and there were crack houses going on and shootings up there and all this kind of crap. So, that was a fun job too. But then like I said, I got that job. Then I went and did that and thought, if I'm not going to be one of those guys that stays in a precinct detective job their entire career, because there's a lot of guys like that. They just want the day job. That wasn't me. I wasn't looking for a day job. I mean, I like being a day job.
You just want to advance.
I want to. Yeah,
Keep
this is
going.
a step.
Keep pushing.
Yeah, and so I was trying to do search warrants, kicking down doors, arresting people for burglary, things like that, and.
So typically that's kind of unheard of.
Yeah, well, really, a lot of people in these jobs basically move the pile of paper from this pile to that pile, and they process it so that people get their insurance claims and stuff. And that's not police work to me. That's your insurance agent. And an insurance adjuster, and I'm not an insurance adjuster. I remember talking to somebody talking to me and another detective. And they said, "What do you do?" And he goes, "Well, I have a desk job." And I said, "I don't know about him, but I'm a detective." That's what I said.
You're just busting them.
I know. I don't know about him, but I'm a detective. He may have a desk job, but I'm a detective. First of all, I was proud of that title of detective,
Yeah.
I worked hard to get there. And I wasn't going to diminish it by being a desk job. But anyway, one of the sergeants that I worked for at the precinct got transferred to sex crimes downtown. And I figured that's a good logical step. If I want to get to homicide, I got to go to crimes against persons. That's what it was called back then instead of the violent crimes section. And so they said, "Hey, what do you think about working sex crimes?" I'm there. That's what I said. And so I remember I told my old sergeant that I was working for at that time, I'm going to sex crimes. He goes, "Oh man, don't go. This is a great job. Stay here with us." Yeah.
Trying to retain you.
He was trying to retain me, and he goes, that's a sweatshop. And I go, "Yeah, it is." I didn't realize how much it was at that point. It is a sweatshop, but I did. And I went.
What does that mean, like sweatshop? Like what?
The caseload is so heavy, and the possibility of something going south is so great. If you don't get
you're overworked.
Way overworked. And not only that, if you ignore this case and something bad happens, you'll be the lead story at 5 tomorrow about this little kid.
Because it's serious.
It's serious stuff, yeah. And so that's why it's it's a sweatshop. It really is.
So did you feel as if that detective unit, did you, I guess, build your chops there? Like it was basically not to just disregard your time on patrol or the Berg theft piece, but what is it, the sexual assault unit now?
Yeah.
Did that really help you with your homicide detective skills?
I have always said I could never think of a better way to prepare me for homicide than the sex crimes unit, because I was, first of all, I was interviewing a lot of people, honing my interview and interrogation skills. I was getting called out to scenes, stranger through the window rapist scenes in the middle of the night. I was doing all this stuff and balancing a heavy caseload. You don't have a heavy caseload in homicide, but every case is heavy in homicide.
Yes.
Yeah. So one case in homicide is worth 100 in burglary and probably 30 in sex crimes, right? So
I get it.
Yeah, but so then I just was doing that again, trying to do more than I had to, trying to get a reputation of being a good, hardworking guy. And I was at that time, we were still in the public safety building, and homicide was at one room and sex crimes was right next door. And Dave Ritter, who was the sergeant in homicide, comes walking into sex crimes. I'm sitting typing on a typewriter, and he goes, "Hey, Cloyd, you have any interest in going to homicide?" I said, "Yeah, I do." I didn't go, "Oh, yeah."
So out of the blue, he comes in.
Yeah. And asked me if I want to work homicide. And I said, "Yes, I do."
Because that was like the coveted spot to go.
It was, yeah.
I remember when you needed to be really good at what you did.
Right.
But also, it's political too, because you got to network and you got to be. It's almost like the good old boy club, but
that's
you've
true.
got to be welcomed because it's a tight unit.
It is, yeah. You don't want, and if you get somebody that doesn't play well with others, it can make it really difficult. But yeah, he said that to me, and and next thing you know, I was in homicide. I got orders to go. Actually, I was on vacation. I was on vacation in Yellowstone National Park, and when I got back, there was a message on my phone. "Hey, you got transferred to homicide. When you get back, go there." So that's where I was. And
that is so cool. All right, so before I lose this train of thought,
okay,
when you first started, obviously the amount of time in patrol to the detectives, you mentioned something, a message on your phone, you're on vacation.
Right.
The technology then.
Oh, yeah.
How did that impact when you compare it to today's technology, your cases and how I think effective you were? Could you have been better having today's technology back in the day?
Oh, no question. I tell people all the time when I'm looking at cold cases and they go, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that. I said, well, they didn't know this stuff that we know now. And they had a little toolbox with a hammer and a saw and a screwdriver where I have a whole set of hydraulic equipment with a construction crew at my disposal.
Night and day.
Night and day. Not even a comparison. Back then I had a pager that would go off, and my original pager was just a number, and I'd call the number.
Yeah.
Now,
a couple of steps until you figure out what the hell's going on.
And then if I needed to get a hold of somebody, if I was on the street, I had to go find a phone because I didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have cell phones, and all that. Plus the, access to information. When I left Homicide, I could get anything I want from my desk.
Yeah.
Before, like when I was in Homicide, first of all, we didn't have computers. We had, the computers where you could run WASIC, NCIC, C-King is what it was called then, KCS, and all that. But you had to go to the other end. It was down there, and there was just one terminal, and it printed in dot matrix, So that was a pain, and now, if I wanted a driver's license photo, I had to send a letter. I'd get it back in about 3 weeks. At the end, I could just send an email and I'd have that driver's license photo in 2 minutes. Yeah, immediately.
So that's a completely, warp speed advancement.
Oh yeah,
right?
Oh yeah. And then also when I could run anything from my desk. I didn't have to go use another computer for anything. I could run people at WASIC, NCIC. I could do if somebody's in jail anywhere in the country, I can find out from my desk. If someone anything going on with them. It's all right there.
Okay, so let's just go a little bit further on that. So let's just say if you were to compare your entirety, how many years in Homicide?
22.
All right, so if you compared 22 years from when you initially started as like a boot, if you will,
right, to
when you left, does any year or any time frame in that space resonate with you as far as valuing it more? Do you know what I'm getting at?
I think 1999 is when we went to computers, and that was good, but it was still very limited. And I don't remember what year it was that we finally had internet access from those computers.
Had to have been at least at 02,
yeah,
01, maybe a couple of years.
A couple of years later, and then all the other stuff we had. Like instead of typing forms. Everything's on the computer. If I want to send a lab request, I had to get an old form with triple carbon. This is well after we had computers, and type out this form to send to the lab to ask for something to be done. I'd call them up and go, you should move to 1980s technology. And then finally now it's all pull up the lab request and send
right
it,
there.
and it's there instantly. And you ain't get a response back. What about this? What do you think? What do you want done with this? And back and forth, you have that contact. And so email. Didn't have email. I mean, geez. I remember the first time I was telling somebody about email on there when we first got email. I said, you can send this to any place in the world, and it doesn't cost. It'll get there immediately, and it doesn't cost a dime. And Jim Pryor was the bureau chief. Oh, wait. We better make sure it doesn't cost it.
It's amazing. Yeah, bureau chief.
Yeah, I know.
Thinking about dollars and cents.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
I know. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, and so those are the things, and but so many others. And when you talk about the art of homicide investigation, because it is a lot of science, but it's also an art.
All right, so let's walk it back when you first started. Is there something that you can account for that was really impactful, like one of your first cases?
Well, the first case, one of the first big cases I wasn't primary, but I worked on the murder of Antonio Terry. I was brand new, and so that had a big impact.
So Antonio was a Seattle police
officer. Was killed in the line of duty.
He was basically ambushed.
He was,
to a degree, assaulted.
Right.
Right off the Swift Albro exit.
Right. Exactly. So I was working a lot on that, and then the next year was the Pang warehouse fire, where 4 Seattle firefighters were killed, and I was heavy into that.
Which is the monument in Pioneer Square.
Right. That shows the 4 firefighters. That's right. And because of the other thing is because of my experience as an EMT, I had a lot of friends that were firefighters out in the county, but also Seattle firefighters. And, I remember being off duty one time with my wife, and we're taking the kids to a pizza place. I'm walking in, and there's a firefighter friend I knew. He goes, "Hey, how's that going, man? I'm so glad you're on that case. I'm so glad you're on this case." That's cool. Before the arrest and everything, And it was like,
yeah. Do you mind if we get into a little bit with Antonio?
Oh, sure, yeah.
What did it feel like? I mean, obviously it's tragic,
right?
But what did it feel like when you'd worked around that person to work that case?
Well, I hadn't worked around Antonio, but I had played football with him because he was in the pick and pull.
Yeah, so you knew him.
I knew him.
I get it.
And we weren't buddies. Right? I mean, I knew him. Hey, how's it going, Antonio?
Yeah.
Because I have worked with other officers that were killed in the line of duty where I worked a lot closer with them. But Antonio, I didn't really know him, but it didn't matter. He was a Seattle police officer. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
And he was killed, and he was just
What's
doing
that like?
Well, first of all, I've talked about this before. There's you have that first emotional hit, but then you go into work mode, right? There's a power takeoff lever. Cloyd the person, Cloyd the detective, and you do that, and then you're just laser focused on getting this done.
So how long would you say that lever or that nozzle lasts before you make that switch?
Well, in this case, I heard about the murder. I wasn't called to the scene, but I heard about it. I was at my son's baseball Little League game, and said, I heard about a Seattle police officer getting killed last night. And I go, really? I didn't know about it. And so I looked it up, found it, and then, oh, jeez. And then the next morning when I showed up for work, of course,
it's your case to work.
Things were, well, I wasn't the primary, but they're making the task force, and you're on the task force, and so we were separated physically from everybody.
Okay.
And that's all we did.
That's your singular focus.
That's everybody. There were like 10 of us, and that's all we did.
How long did that take from start of being on that task force to completion?
That was probably because they made the arrests real early. It was just solidifying the case. So it was about a week or two of the real intense task force
comparison levels to the viewership and audience here is that fast, slow, or what?
I would say the case takes. When I say it takes out, that's when it was intense and everybody was working, because murder cases can last years.
Sure.
So and just because you make the arrest the first day, it can still last months or years.
Oh yeah.
But so it's for this kind of case, I would say average. It's not short. It's not long. I've worked a lot longer on things, and for example, if you want to talk about Tim Brenton, the other Seattle police officer killed.
Let's get into Timmy.
So that was primary in that one, and that was getting the call that there was an officer down at 29th and Yesler.
2009. Yeah,
2009. October 31st, 2009. And Casey, my oldest son, was working East 3rd, and he had just left my house. His wife and kid were still there to go to work, and I'm hearing there's an officer shot. Officer involved shooting, officer down at 29th and Yesler. That's all I had, and I'm like, oh geez, And so I didn't. It could have been my son,
yeah,
and nobody knew who it was. So I remember getting my stuff, and my wife was on the couch with my daughter-in-law, and a couple of my sister-in-laws were over from Spokane. And she said, did you get called in? I said, yeah, I got called in. She says, what is it? I said, just an officer involved shooting, because that happened all the time. It's just, where at? I said, I don't know, because I didn't want to tell her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she had two sons working patrol that night. And then she goes, what happened? I go, I don't know. Well, I always know what happened. And she knew what it was. So I'm just about to the door when my cell phone rang, and it was Casey, my son. And he goes, hey, I'm there. He's dead, man. He's dead, Dad. He's dead. And I said, all right. And then I turned to them and I said, that's Casey. He's fine. But there was an officer killed in Seattle, and they all started crying. And I got in my car and beat feet downtown. I was the first detective unit to arrive. And when I pulled up, I parked down at King Way in Yesler, because the tape was up across there. And there were 60 patrol cars in the area searching for this guy. There were helicopters in the air, and there was fire engines there, and a couple aid units, and it was just this loud cacophony, as I say, of all this stuff going on. As I was walking up the hill, there was a patrol officer there, and I didn't know the patrol officer. I said, do you know who is it? And he said, Tim Brenton. I didn't know Tim Brenton.
Okay.
But I said, is he related to Boyd Brenton? Boyd was his dad, who I worked around, was a brand new officer. He goes, yeah, that's his son. And I literally thought, I dodged a bullet, but he didn't tonight, So I remember walking up the hill, looking at the car, getting some real brief information, and then walking over. And when I grabbed that yellow tape and ducked under it, and there was nobody else there, it was like silent. I couldn't hear any of the noise. And I remember walking up and looking into the car and seeing blood and seeing Tim's body, and it was he'd been it was horribly misfigured because he'd taken 4 rifle rounds to the head. And so I remember thinking, the only thing I thought to myself, the only Cloyd moment is, Jason and I are going to have to find the son of a bitch that did this. And I have no idea.
Jason was your partner.
Jason Kasner was my partner. And I said that. So, of course, and then, other detectives start showing up. I remember Mark Wursman, he came up to me and he goes, let me know if you need anybody else. I said, call everybody in the unit in. I want everybody at work. He said, okay. So he did. He called
awesome,
everybody. And that was, I went from that to, 20-hour days.
On that case alone. So was there like Antonio's?
Yeah, we set up a task force. Yeah.
Okay.
And what we did is there was me and Jason, Al Cruz, and Russ Wecklich, who were also in our squad, were the 4 primary guys. Jason and I were ultimate primary, but they were right there with us. Mm-hmm. And then we had everybody else running down leads for us. We'd get thousands of tips phoned in. And we had like the Major Crimes Task Force. We had intelligence. We had all these other CPTs and ACT teams and everything. As these tips came in, if it didn't seem right away that it's probably something, we would send them out to follow up. And if something comes up, you call the sergeant. Yeah. And if he thinks it's something, he'll tell us. Because otherwise we'd be overwhelmed. We wouldn't be able to handle it. So that's what we did. But again, like I said, we'd get these thousands of tips in, but I would get there. I have an RV out at the police range, and I would drive down there, get 3 hours sleep, get back up, and drive back to the office. And luckily I have a shower and everything, so I could take a shower. And I had to have new clothes brought to me because I didn't bring clothes with me. Yeah. So, and then that's what I did. And so but I'd get there in the morning and there would be stacks of new tip sheets. And I would just, before anybody was there, I'd start reading through them or just scamming through them, see if anything looked good, because they weren't going to come to me originally. But I remember seeing, like I said, I saw one that a woman said that her and her friend were driving near Bourne and Yesler when this happened, and they saw all the police screaming to the scene. And she said, there was this car that pulled along our right side, and it was like a light blue Toyota-looking vehicle, and the driver looked like either a Hispanic or light-skinned black male. And I said to my friend, that's probably who they're looking for. There was no identifying information, nothing like that. Just, that's interesting.
So all these hundreds of thousands of tips, for some reason, you're drawn to this one.
Yeah, because it was, it's in the area at the time. Because she said we were pulling over because there were police cars going everywhere. Yeah. And this car was acting furtively, she thought. I never talked to this woman. I don't know if her name was on the tip or not. I just thought, I just kept that in the back of my mind. And eventually it came to be
a huge tip.
It is a huge tip. I didn't realize, because you never know when you're looking at them. Yeah. Because that's the thing about tips, is separating the wheat from the chaff, because of 1,000 tips.
What is it again?
Wheat from the chaff. That's it.
We're getting some homicide lingo.
No.
What?
This is folklore. When you're getting your wheat.
Back me up here, buddy.
When you're getting your wheat and your wheat farming, you take all the crap off and just keep the wheat.
It's a bit of old school.
It is old
Sorry,
school.
I'm lost.
But you have to. But yeah. So you have to, because otherwise you're just, out of 1,000 tips, 4 or 5 might have anything to do with the case at all. Yeah. And people are calling in, they're trying to do the right thing. And it's not, but some of them are, I was on a bus and this guy looked suspicious. 3 days later.
Random.
Yeah. And matter of fact, and just weird things like that. So eventually, when the funeral was going on, I'm going to work through the funeral. I'm not stopping. Matter of fact, Jim Pugel was a bureau chief then. He said, are we going to shut the investigation down for the funeral? And I said, no. Right. I said, we're here to investigate this case, So, my partner, Jason, went along with Russ and Al, but there were like 3 or 4 of us left in the office. And I was in there and I was doing something. And Tim Renahan from the intelligence unit came up to me and he said, he's a detective. And he says, hey, Cloyd, I just got this phone call from this lady I know from an unrelated case that I was working. She's a manager of an apartment building down in Tukwila. And she says, and we had, just a couple of days before this, we had released still shots that we got of the suspect vehicle from officer dash-mounted cameras.
Yeah, so that's why I tie into this technology piece.
Right. Oh yeah, that was huge.
Because that was really, you were on the scent then.
Yeah, we were.
Because for those that don't know, patrol cars, when they have the in-car cameras, the video cameras, when you're responding to an emergent situation, the car camera turns on.
Right.
But it records, even if it's not turned on, it constantly records.
That's right.
And that's how you were able to, based upon that tip of somebody active furtive in a light blue or white colored Toyota looking vehicle.
Right.
Then you were able to just get that footage, and then there it is.
There it is. Yeah, we found the car. Well, we saw it first the first time we saw the car, we were looking at a South Precinct car, was racing northbound on 14th South, approaching Yesler. And we saw, and there's this white SUV that comes along and makes a left onto 14th from Yesler. And right behind it it's nighttime, so you can't tell. It looks white, of a hatchback type Toyota looking vehicle crosses in front of it. So the next one we got was a car that had gone up Yesler a moment before that. And so we started watching that car that car's camera going up Yesler eastbound from 14th. And eventually you see the white SUV go by, but there's no small Toyota behind it. And so Al Cruz was running the record. I said, stop, back it up. Let's advance one frame at a time. And we did. And when we got to the point where she was almost even with the SUV, you could see a taillight to the right of that SUV. So this guy had pulled to, even though there's not a lane there, it's a parking lane. He had pulled to the right to avoid the patrol car seeing him. I said, there he is right there. And then we went back. Once we had that and we knew what it looked like, then we went back to they'd done a traffic stop on Martin Luther King Way at Cherry Street just before they went to 29th and Yesler. And so we watched that video and we saw that car pass them. Yeah. And I said, that's the car right there. And so then at first we had it for a few days and we finally, I decided, it was that Wednesday actually, Steve, who was the SWAT commander and then went to Homicide. My God, my mind just blanked.
Steve Wilski?
Yeah. Steve Wilski was the lieutenant at the time, and he says, and I said, Steve, I think we want to release some stills of that car to the media. He goes, is that what you want to do? It's your call. I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. So we did. And of course, then we started getting more tips in. The other thing we did is because we had that, we were trying to find out what kind of car it really is. And so we had a couple of major crimes task force people going out trying to find an expert that could tell us what kind of car it was. And they ended up getting pointed to this guy in Bellingham who owned a junkyard. And they took the picture up with him. And he was showing, they said he was using calipers and all this stuff. And he said, this is a 1982 to 84 Nissan Nissan 210, not a B210. That's a different car. And this car is really rare. I mean, there was only made for a couple of years. And so then what we did is we got on DOL and give us a list of every
So Department of Licensing?
Yeah, every Datsun 210 is registered in the state of Washington. So and there were like 400 of them. So then we sent teams of detectives or officers out to put eyeballs on every single one of them.
Yeah.
And we were getting back to 85% of them were Hulks, right? But in the meantime, this tip comes in from Renahan tells me, he says, yeah, this lady who runs this apartment building, she says, there's a guy that lives in her complex that has a car just like that. And he never has covered it before, but yesterday he started covering it. And this was Thursday, the day after release. And so it's a piece of crap car. Why would you put a car cover on it? So I said to Bob Valor and Gary Nelson and Rolf Norton, would you guys go sit in the car? I'm going to get a search warrant.
So those are other detectives in Homicide, part of the task force?
Yeah, they were all involved. Well, the other thing, first thing I did was I said, what's the guy's name? And he said his name's Christopher Monfort. And I ran Christopher Monfort, no criminal history. Now, that's unusual. So I found a driver's license record for him. So I sent the Department of Licensing an email to get a driver's license photo of Christopher Monfort. Instantly got it back.
Technology.
Yeah, and it was a smiling, light-skinned black male. And that's when I thought, a light-skinned or Hispanic black male.
Based on that tip.
I said, this is our guy. That's when I sent him down. This is our guy. I mean, then I knew. These cases are like, I've said this before, it's like a table of dominoes. And once that first one tips, they all fall into place and they all go. And if it stops, then you made a mistake somewhere. You got to go back, and see to where the last one fell. Where did I make a mistake? Oh, it was this way, not that way. And so, because once it does, and that's what happened to this one, once the dominoes started falling, it was the whole thing was down.
Yeah, and then that guy's repertoire, if you will, that's a good word, I'm not sure, but he scouted.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, he was pulled over by patrol in a different vehicle that he owned.
His ex-police car.
Yeah, how many days before?
It was
I forget.
It was a week or two before, or 10
But
days before.
he was scouting.
Yeah, he was scouting. Yeah,
Right.
Well, he was running. We got all his computers and all his search history. And he was running where to Seattle police officers eat. Where is the Seattle Police Officers Guild?
Yeah, he came by here.
He did. Well, because when he searched his car, I didn't search it, of course. I was way too important for that. But I have people.
Love it.
Anyway, and they gave me. There's a receipt in the car, and I looked at the receipt, and it was a liquor store right across the street from the guild office. Yeah. And it was for 11:30 on a Wednesday or Thursday morning, and he got some Applejack crap or something.
Terrible
alcohol. And I thought this guy was sitting over there scoping the guild office, drinking his alcohol when this happened. But scoping the guild office. This was after the shooting, by the way, and before he was identified. So it was in the week after the shooting.
And then he also, I didn't know it was after.
Yeah, it was after the shooting. Yeah.
Holy
yeah. Wow. He was going for, because he would drop an American flag. He did the bombings at Charles Street, which is the vehicle maintenance shop for the city.
Which is just north of Soto. It's underneath all the on-ramps, I-5. It's east of Safeco or now T-Mobile Park.
Yeah, right down. If you go down, go eastbound on Royal Brougham Street, it's right there.
Right.
And so he lit a mobile command post on fire, and then he had pipe bombs underneath other patrol cars with delayed fuses. And his idea was to blow up firefighters and police officers responding to the scene by doing it. And he blew up like 7 or 8 bombs. Matter of fact, we had the in-car video from the first watch officer that arrived at the scene. And the first thing you notice is he's taking, this is like at 3 o'clock in the morning, he's taking or maybe later than that, 4 o'clock in the morning, he's taking the Dearborn off-ramp from southbound I-5. And as he goes down the ramp, someone runs in front of him. It was Christopher Montfort running in front of him. And Montfort was wearing a backpack, and there was something sticking up from the backpack. It was a rifle, because his plan was to snipe officers from a nearby hill or building.
High ground,
while they were there for this fire. But for whatever reason, he didn't do it or couldn't do it or chickened out. Wow. So he was
in action.
He would drop an American flag at every scene. He had a manifesto.
How big of a flag was it?
Well, at the Charles Street one, it was a big flag, and he had it tied to a knife, and it was poked in the roof of a patrol car. At Tim's scene, it was a bandana, it was smaller.
But some sort of
American flag. That was his kind of a signature. Matter of fact, when I was there at the scene, I saw that American flag. It was actually half a block north.
At Timmy's scene?
At Timmy's scene. I was standing there looking at, and I had nothing to do with the Charles Street scene, because that wasn't a homicide. Arson bomb squad and the intelligence unit were doing it. But the intelligence unit is right next to homicide. So I would talk to those guys, and I knew about the American flag at the scene. And so I thought, I wonder if this is related. So one of the things we did, though, when we got you were talking about passive recording in patrol cars, is we had to take the hard drive from their patrol car and send it out of state to capture the passive recording.
So for video analysis.
Right. And so we got back a recording, and in this recording, there's no sound, there's only video. And one of the things, I looked for was when they made the left turn onto 29th northbound from Yesler, they went down and made a U-turn, and I noticed that the flag was not in the street there. So, it was obviously dropped there after the shooting.
Yeah.
And then they parked, and they were there, and you could just see it looking out the front window, and a car goes by, and then a few minutes later, this other car goes by, and the headlight pattern's weird, because you can see how it's reflected. When we saw the first video of what ended up being Montfort's car, the right headlight was either misaimed or burned out. You could tell that. So as this car comes up, you see there's only one beam on the road, and he passes their car, and it's Montfort.
So he's scouting.
Yeah, scouting. He made a right turn and came around. And about a minute later, you see that same light pattern and stop right next to him. Then you can see the car shaking. And you can see little bits of blood kind of spattering. And then the car, you see the headlight pattern backing away. And then you see Britt Sweeney at that time outside the car. She'd already fired at the car. She has a gun in her hand.
She was a student officer at the time.
And, you talk about technology. Another thing of technology, when she was screaming for help, she didn't say where she was, because she was she's brand new, first of all, and she is under a ton of stress. But radio because of the system in the car, could tell where they were. And she said, and radio says, we showed them at 29th and Yesler. And so that's why everybody ran to 29th and Yesler.
Amazing.
Because she was just calling for help, but not saying anything about where they were. And so that's another piece of technology that was huge in this case.
Yeah. Well, those are two huge cases. And obviously the firefighter one too. It's
Yeah, absolutely.
We could go on and on with those cases.
Oh, yeah.
Like
I should write a book.
I don't think you have. You talk about your career and your pinnacle was homicide.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you knew at a young age, 12 years old, writing to the department, and that was your lifelong goal.
It was.
It's almost divine.
That's what I tell people.
Right?
It was divine intervention. I was designed for this job just because I have the skill set for the job, but also I have the temperament for the job. I have the personality where I'm not going to crawl into a bottle or get divorced 5 times because of all this stuff I'm seeing. I could separate the horror.
What do you equate that to? Is it just...
I'm a sociopath. No, I'm just kidding.
The podcast is over.
Yeah.
No, but seriously though,
I don't know. Yeah, it's just my personality type. I've always been that way.
You're very gregarious, outgoing.
Right.
You drive the conversation.
Right.
And it's like, with that though, you have to have some semblance of your armor being dented by all this stuff.
Well, yeah. I suppose you do. And there are certain cases that, first of all, seeing dead kids has always been kryptonite for me. And I had a lot of dead kid cases. Not all of them are homicide because we went to all dead kid cases. So if it was a SIDS or something like that, but some of them were homicides. And so that, but again, I was in work mode, but I'd always, go, oh my God. Matter of fact, there was a girl up in the central area. I probably had 2 years in homicide, maybe 3. She gave birth to a baby alive and just put it in a bag and threw it in the garbage in her bathroom. And she started vaginally bleeding, so they took her to the hospital or the clinic.
She was hemorrhaging.
Yeah, and they said, this girl's giving birth. And of course, her grandmother, who she lived with, had no clue.
No clue.
No clue. And she denied it. And then finally, they got permission to search from the grandmother. They went to the house, went down to the basement, and in the bag, underneath some garbage, there was a baby's body in a plastic bag, a little boy. And so, long story short, there was this. We made the arrest, and I'd have these big philosophical questions with the prosecutor. But we found out she had told her friend she was going to do that. And her friend told her, no, give me the baby. I'll adopt it. Don't do it. Don't do it. But the friend, unfortunately, didn't tell anybody until it was over. And then the friend came forward and gave me that statement. I said to the prosecutor, this is first-degree murder.
Premeditated.
She premeditated it. This baby was born alive. The medical examiner, Richard Hare for this case, you can tell this baby's drawn breaths, right? It was born alive.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Well, they first charged second-degree murder. And then I was at home one day, and I was doing something, but I had news radio on.
Yeah.
And I heard that she'd pled guilty to manslaughter 2.
No.
Yeah. And I was like, are you kidding me? And first of all, they always, when they're going to take a plea, they usually call relatives and they call the detectives and say, what do you think of this? Well, nobody did that. And so I was hot. And I called down to Mark Larson, who at that time was the chief criminal deputy. And I left him a
scathing voicemail.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. F-bombs here, F-bombs there.
Yeah.
And then...
warranted.
Yeah. And then... So the prosecutor who took the plea was not the assigned prosecutor, but because the assigned prosecutor was out of town, and the prosecutor who took the plea was another prosecutor who is now a Superior Court judge, yeah, Jim Rogers, great guy, and he was just filling in, right? And so Mark, apparently he was in Europe on vacation.
Sidra?
Rogers was on on vacation, and like an hour later, I get a call from him from Europe, and he goes, oh man, Cloyd, I'm so sorry. I didn't know any of this stuff. I thought this was clear to you, blah, 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 blah. And so I was hot. But he, good for him for calling me. He didn't have to do that. Yeah. And he is a great guy. He's a great judge. So it was going to come time for sentencing. And, she'd agreed to like a 3-year sentence. And they were going to plead for a 3-year sentence. And I was outraged. So I wrote a letter to the judge. And this long letter, and I basically said, who's speaking up for this child? There's nobody there. Normally at a sentencing, there's advocates for the victim speaking up. This kid, and I said, this boy was never held. He was never cuddled. He was never even given a name. And, this was first-degree murder, and it shouldn't have been. This is a lowball plea, and I'm going to speak up for the baby. Well, this judge, Carol Shapira, who's quite a liberal judge, quite a let him go kind of judge. Mm-hmm. I went to the sentencing, and she said I was touched by that letter, and she made, I think, whatever the maximum is, like 10 or 11 years. That's what she sentenced her to. And of course, the defense attorney was not happy. But this kid, nobody was speaking out for this kid.
Man, that's so cool, because not only are you working the case,
right?
It's not really a whodunit. It's pretty straightforward.
It was very straightforward, yeah.
But your service, when you swear to be a police officer, it didn't end there, man.
No,
you were the victim advocate.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I was a dad too. That's what
I think that's what some of the public doesn't really recognize with just policing. It's like, sometimes when you're in patrol, you wear the uniform, you punch in and then you punch out. You go home.
Right.
And you're a detective, though. Those cases come home with you. Like,
they
you're
do.
constantly going, right?
Thinking, yeah.
And I just hope people realize that the drive you had for the passion, is that, man, that's your oath of service.
Well, yeah,
that's just kind of the person you are.
And the other thing is, a lot of people who were family of victims stayed in contact with me later and would call me. A couple of them showed up at my retirement party, and they
lifelong friendships, if you will.
And there was one guy that was shot and killed up at 29th and King, real high gangbang area. He was a young black male, not a gangbanger, but it ended up being a serial killer. I thought it was just a gang shooting when I got there, but it was only 2 blocks away from his house. And his mother, of course, was devastated. And I would call her and talk to her, and she'd call back and forth. And so she called me one time. This is a year after the murder or something, and checking in. And she said, hey, I got to get out of this neighborhood. I'm moving. As a matter of fact, she says, I'm moving. I'm looking at this place in Lake City. And she gave me the address. And I said, I just had a murder like 2 blocks from there.
So just too violent for her? Is that why?
Yeah, that's why. I said, don't move there. And she goes, you're kidding. I said, no. I said, listen, when you decide someplace you want to live, you call me and tell me where, and I'll tell you if I think it's a good idea or not. And it's true.
It's so true.
Yeah, it is true.
Because you're just being real.
Yeah, I'm being real. That's right. She's trying to get away from the violence. Don't move from one violent area to another violent. It's a different type of violence, but it's still violence. Go someplace, and I don't mean you have to move out of the city. And she didn't. There are plenty of places in this city that you can live comfortably and not have to worry about constant violence or shootings on your street and things like that. And so that's what I did. And, she was, thank you so much. So
that's just that connection.
It is.
You're talking about earlier where some detectives just punch in, here's the file, move on.
Right.
But that, dude, it just shows you you were born for this.
Yeah.
And that you actually had that human compassion. Like, you continue the work post-case.
Post-case, yeah. I stay in contact with a lot of people. Well, as a matter of fact, if you're a mother and you lose a child, it doesn't matter if that child is 2 or 42. That's the worst thing that can ever happen to you in your life, or mother or father. And so that was the worst moment of their lives. And so I'm there for them, and I understand that, and I show compassion. And that's why I always make myself available. I say, don't call me Detective Steiger, call me Cloyd. Here's my cell phone. Here's my direct line.
That's so cool. So with that type of, I think, mindset, with how you work the cases and how you maintain human relationships post-incident.
Right.
Let's put it back on the suspect. So do you take that type of compassion and empathetic tone to develop some type of connection with a suspect just to get their cooperation?
Oh, I do. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a perfect example of this is it was just a routine gang murder, that we had handled. We got a lot of those. I didn't get I ended up getting lucky because I had weird murders and strange murders,
off the wall stuff. But I didn't handle my share of gang murders. But I had this guy that did this homicide. I knew it was him, and he was under arrest. He was in the interview room, and I was there with him. And first of all, the conversational tone is really low key. It's like, like relaxing.
I said the best interrogation is the one where the suspect doesn't realize he's being interrogated. It's just a conversation, right? And so this guy, he was a young black guy, 25, 26. And I said, I know you're tired, man. He goes, what? I mean, 26, that's old to be in a gang. I said, you're constantly, I'm real close to him. I'm almost whispering. You're running around. You're looking over your shoulder, whether it's the police going to get you, or if it's another gang that's going to shoot you, and it's constant stress, and you're just tired of this life and tired. And he stared at me for a few minutes. It went on a lot longer than that, but he stared at me for a few minutes. He goes, man, it's like you can read my mind. That's exactly that's what he said. Yeah.
So you just had that connection.
Yeah, I just had a connection. That's why you got to treat these suspects with respect. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. You know, you gotta be respectful, and you know.
And so, man, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I know.
Because I was not that great of a detective.
Well, you didn't have time to develop.
I didn't have time to develop.
Yeah, that's exactly. Everybody starts out new.
But what I can remember though is like I worked a few shootings, a couple stabbings, like right when I started.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff happening on the Ave, and I remember just taking that stuff home,
right?
Like mentally, just constantly like going through how to solve this
because it's all on you. It's not like you're a patrol officer. You write a report. Somebody else is going to take care of this. This is you.
It's so true because if you just don't work it,
it's not going anywhere.
Not going to go anywhere.
It's not going to go anywhere.
Nobody's really being the victim advocate.
No, they're not. Yeah. So yeah.
So give me one. Serial killers, you mentioned them.
Right.
So why do you think you were drawn to like off the wall killings, and then what spawned your interest in just obviously your book, the serial killer one, and then your cold case, like what is it about serial killers that really just kind of captivates you? Well,
I mean, it's not just serial killers, but I mean, I'm a student. I've always been, and I still am to this day, a student of homicide investigation, right? And
constantly learning.
I teach a lot now at things, but when I go to these seminars and teach, I also sit and listen to other people's presentations and learn. I have a lot of friends that are forensic psychiatrists and PhDs and this and that. Matter of fact, I was at a conference one time and I was at a table and there were like 5 PhDs there, and we're drinking, having a beer and stuff in the evening. And I said, I'm a PhD too. And they said, you are? Yeah, I'm a pretty hunky detective. And they all laughed. But anyway, so I'm doing it. Well, and first of all, what drew me to them assigned, it's absolute random. My name is on a list. And when my number comes up, that case is mine. And it just happened to come up for these cases.
But I would say just based upon who you are and the cases you've touched.
Right.
Some of that is divine intervention.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah,
right.
Because I did. Yeah, I always got, like, for example, we mentioned Russ Wecklich before. Wecklich, he and his partner at the time, Al Cruz, every case they got was a gangbang case, which is tough because nobody wants to talk to you. You got to pull teeth to get information until somebody else is in trouble and is willing to drop the dime, which happens all the time. Yep. They're hard to work.
They rat on each other.
They rat on each other all the time. But anyway, so when I hadn't gotten a gangbang case in months. And when I got this one at 29th and King I was talking about, he kind of snickered at me, you got a gangbang case. And then the next day, I found out it was a serial killer. And he's like, are you kidding me? He was so mad.
So let's just explore that one. Like, what was it about that made him a serial killer?
Well, that guy was a jihadist. And he was a radicalized American Muslim. And he would just pull up on random people and shoot them. And he did.
Was that the one where he executed a couple guys on 28th?
No, that was the 29th King. There were 2 guys.
That's the one you were talking about.
Yeah. And then he did one
in patrol at that time, I think.
And he did one in White Center that the county handled. And that's how I found out, because we had looked into this guy's. Oh, I remember how this guy's name came up. I had this shooting and all this stuff, and we're talking. One of the victims was Muslim, and the other guy was this guy I told you about, who they were gay. Mm-hmm. And they were not criminals. They actually both had jobs, and matter of fact, the one.
So just random victims.
Yeah, right. Well, he actually, this guy, he kind of lured these people in because they had a friend. Oh, this guy, one of the victims, I'm sorry, he was on Grindr.
Okay.
Which is a
dating
gay app. Yeah, for gay men. And made contact with this guy and said, why don't you meet me up at, I forgot the name of the club up there on East Pine or East Pike Street. And so he was talking to him and stuff, and there's like 3 or 4 of them in there at the club. And when it goes out there outside and they meet this guy, and the other guy's they're gonna go off somewhere or leave. Yeah. And they said, why don't you come with us? And these other 2 guys, both of them told me separately, I didn't want to get in the car with them because he creeped me out.
Hold the Line with Mike Solon is sponsored by StopDefunding.com. The senseless trend of defunding police departments must be stopped. Over 200,000 reasonable citizens have already signed our petition, and we need your help. Visit stopdefunding.com and add your signature to help us protect public safety. Now more than ever, our voices must be heard. Speak up at stopdefunding.com.
Bad vibes.
Yeah, there was something. I said, and he couldn't. What was it about? I don't know. I said, you could tell he wasn't gay, and he said, yeah, that's exactly right. I didn't.
So they read him.
They read him, right? And so they said, then they went and gotten the car, the victim's car. And I said, wait a second. They had a car? This is like 2 days later. Nobody mentioned a car.
It's a big lead.
Yeah, big lead. So we called the victim's family up, and not the one that I'm talking about before, but the Muslim kids. Did he have a car? Yeah, what did he have? And so he told us. We looked up all vehicles registered. There it is. I put a bulletin out at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. About 2:15, I get a call from a car in the valley. It says, we got that car. It's parked on street out in Rainier Valley. And so we got there. There is dried blood pouring from the passenger side. So I go, I guess the shooting happened in the car.
Wow.
And so
you just executed him there.
Yeah, executed him in the car and then drugged their bodies out.
Okay, so that's what it was. It drug him out and dumped him on the street?
Dumped him on the street, yeah. Jeez. We didn't know that, though. We thought they were killed on the street.
Sure.
So we take the car, send it to processing, and have it processed for fingerprints. I don't do that. I'm much too important. I have people. No, but Amanda Post, who is a fingerprint technician, is in the back seat behind the driver. She finds a palm print, and she develops a good palm print. And she runs it in AFIS, which is the Automated Fingerprint Identification System. And it comes back to a guy named Ali Muhammad Brown. Mm-hmm. Okay, so first of all, finding a fingerprint or DNA at the scene of a murder doesn't mean it's your killer's fingerprint. It could have been there at any time for any reason. So I said, Jason, call this guy's family and see if they know Ali Muhammad Brown. Because, they're a Muslim family. Maybe it's a family member.
Yeah.
They call it. We've never heard of that guy. So we start doing some research on him. Found out that a couple of weeks before, or maybe a month before, he'd been down in Siskiyou, California, and had been stopped by the California Highway Patrol driving this white Ford, I forgot, it's an SUV. I forgot the type it was. Oh, excuse me, a Dodge SUV. And he had some dope on him. They arrested him, impounded his car, and he got out. Well, like the next day, we're in the office, and Bob Valler, who was one of the sergeants, comes out and says, hey, Jake Pavlovich, who's one of the King County detectives, he's a major crimes, was then, he's a sergeant now, major crimes detective. He's doing a homicide, and he's looking for this white Dodge, whatever that SUV type was. I went, are you kidding me? So I pick up the phone, I call Jake, we're friends. Mm-hmm. Hey, Jake, you're looking for this car? He goes, yeah. I go, what happened? It was a shooting down in White Center, and this guy was just walking down the street, and the guy just pulled up and just blasted him for no apparent reason. But the car is partially seen on surveillance video. The murder doesn't happen there. So I said, I just found it. We have a double, and I got a guy that just drives that kind of car. I just found out about it. So he comes over, and long story short, we're talking, and I pull up the picture, again, technology. I pull up the picture of the head stamp on the casing, and he says, that's the same brand of ammunition. And I said, did you get an opinion? If you send the bullets in, they'll give you an opinion of what type of gun it was.
Sure.
And he said, yeah, it's a Smith & Wesson M+P. I said, our gun's a Smith & Wesson M+P. So we call the lab, and I talked to Brian Smelzer, who's a ballistics examiner there. Compare this case to that case. 20 minutes later, get a call, same gun. So it's that guy. And it sets off a bunch of big chain reaction, a big SWAT thing.
You had to take him down.
Yeah, except for, unfortunately, he had left town. Because he was in the news.
You went to New York, right?
New Jersey. Yeah, and he walked up on this 19-year-old kid, Brendan Tevlin. This case was on the national news. Brendan Tevlin was a 19-year-old kid who was back from his freshman year at University of Richmond. He lived in West Orange, New Jersey, in a really affluent neighborhood. He'd gone over to his friend's house and texted his mom. They're playing video. I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, but he never showed up. In the meantime, there was a report of shots fired in this intersection in West Orange, which is a really unusual place to have shots fired. And the police show up, and there's no vehicle or anything, but there's casings in the street. Mm. So they start doing this stuff. Well, about a mile and a half down the road, there's this big apartment building, and somebody finds his car in the apartment complex. And they look down, and he's on the passenger side, stuffed down to the floor. He's been shot several times in the head. And so this is kind of a weird thing about how this case came together. I get a call from this guy, a detective in Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey, which is a little town on the Jersey Shore. Mm-hmm. And he says, hey, we had this guy try to do a carjacking in our town last night. This is a tourist town. And he says, but he didn't know how to drive he pulled a gun, he didn't know how to drive a stick. And so he got out and ran, and long story short, he says, he went into a room, in a store, and changed his clothes. I got video, I have still shots of him. And he said, he was in a restaurant the night before, I found out, and ordered food but didn't have enough money. And so he asked the waitress to call his brother in Seattle. And so she did, and he gave him a credit card over the phone. And so he said, I'm going to go back. He says, I went back to the restaurant and said, you still have the phone number? She goes, yeah, it's right here. So he went to his office. He called this guy. Hey, listen, I just want to, we don't want to charge your brother. We just want to make sure you gave us the right name and everything's on the up and up. And you paid. Yeah. What's his name again? Ali Muhammad Brown. So he does a search for Ali Muhammad Brown. He goes, he's wanted for murder in Seattle. And so he says, I said, send me the picture. And he sends me a picture. And I go, yeah, that's him. All right. And I said, he says, there was a shooting in West Orange, which is about 80 miles away. It looked like a random shooting. This kid. I wonder if it's the same guy. So I call up the homicide task force in Essex County, New Jersey, which is handling this. And I said, hey, listen, you got this guy, and I know he's in town. He's a serial killer, and he uses that. What kind of gun do you have? Do you have an opinion on the type of weapon it was? He goes, Smith & Wesson M+P, and that's the same as ours. He goes,
no way.
Yeah, and he goes, I go, yeah, I think it might be the same guy. He goes, no, we're pretty sure this is a robbery gone bad. And so I said to him, tell you what, when your case goes south and the whole robbery thing, give me a call back. In the meantime, the crime lab had run those casings in what's called NIBUS, which is a National Ballistics Computer System, and it linked up with the one in New Jersey as being the same weapon. So then they called back a few days later. Can you send us some casings?
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I sent him some casings. It was the guy, and
so that was a serial killer.
Yeah, he killed,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 4 victims. And so, and he, well, the thing is, the definition of serial killer now, it changes all the time, is at least 2 victims with a cooling off period in between each murder. In other words, a mass shooter is different.
Does it matter how much cooling time is?
No, it could be, more than, it's not, you can't do it, like, if you're running around just shooting people, that's a spree killer. That's different.
Okay.
So, but if you're killing people on Tuesday and then on Thursday and then a month from Thursday, then it's a serial killer.
So was this your first serial killing case that you remember?
No, my first serial killing case was in like 97. A guy called Dwayne Lee Harris. He was strangling prostitutes in Seattle. And I have a lot of, matter of fact, it was on American Detective with Joe Kenda. It was aired in January. It's available on demand. Anyway, on Investigation Discovery, talking about that case. And he would, because I recorded hours of conversations with that guy.
Just, what was he like?
Oh, the funny thing was, he was fine. He was almost pleasant to talk to, and we'd get him, but once he started talking about his kills, once we got him to confess to one murder, then
they just fold.
He told us about all of them. And so, but he would just say, matter of fact, one piece of audio tape that I clipped out and I keep, and they played it in the show, is he's describing to me how he's luring a victim to this building off a Poplar Place, kind of by Dearborn over there near Rainier Avenue. He's going to take her behind there and kill her. And he's going, so I'm looking for a place, and I see this, and then we're going this way. And I said, wait, Dwayne. He goes, yeah. I mean, you weren't looking for a place to do dope, were you? He goes, what? You had a plan, didn't you? He goes, yeah. What was your plan, Dwayne? Murder, man, murder, 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 murder.
Is that what he said?
That's what he said. They play that on that show. Investigation Discovery on demand. Just kidding.
So awesome.
Yeah. So
what is it about Seattle and serial killers?
Everybody asks that. I don't know that it's true that there are more serial killers here than other, but we have some of the biggest names in the nation. Bundy, Green River, prolific. But there are a lot of I tell people this all the time. Even people that are really into serial killers, 95% of them they've never heard of. They've never, because they did 2, 3, 4, 5, and didn't get the big numbers, didn't get the big TV shows. So, like I said, nobody heard of Gary Gene Grant, and even I hadn't.
All right, so when you talk about stuff that happens across the nation, Seattle it's somewhat of a small, big city. That's right. To describe it.
Well, it's grown to a lot bigger city than when I started.
And we don't have the level of violent crime as other major urban areas across the nation. But so when you look at D.C., Chicago, Detroit, whatever, man, they're getting just hundreds of homicides.
They are.
So,
they always have. Yeah.
So
It's a different kind of murder, though.
How so? Like
They're getting the gangbang murders, the dope murders, and we get those. But as a matter of fact, when I was on this Ali Mohammed Brown case, these detectives, a couple of them were Newark detectives, and they said, "How many? Oh man, you don't hardly get any murders." And I go, "Yeah, but we don't get quantity, but we get quality. We get the weird ones." And when they came out here and said, "Man, you guys do get the weird ones. They don't get anything like that. All theirs are all."
So then you're not overwhelmed with just
Right.
these high numbers. So then
Right.
you can actually dig down and actually focus on those cases.
A lot of these places that do those numbers, like Baltimore, which, by the way, I heard is down to under 900 officers now, or 800 officers for a city of Baltimore, who gets 400 murders a year. They did before. They may be getting 6 now. But if they don't have a solid lead to go on in the first 2 or 3 days, they move on to the next one.
Move on.
That case just gets filed. If something comes up, we'll go back to it.
Think about all the victims there and the families that are impacted by that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everybody that's murdered, I say this all the time too. It's like dropping a stone into water. The ripples who are affected go out and out and out and out. I said this I was in a documentary about Ted Bundy. I said, for every person Ted Bundy killed, there are 100 people that were significantly impacted by that. Family, friends, loved ones, co-workers, old schoolmates that are affected by that. So you times it times everyone he did, or Gary Ridgway, those guys. It's just, he leaves a trail of devastation everywhere. Matter of fact, this filmmaker that made this documentary about Ted Bundy was showing it in Utah at this festival, and I'm in there, and they're talking to me about it. And one of the things she said is, I get so tired of everybody saying that Ted Bundy was so charming. He wasn't charming. That was an act. Ted Bundy was a murdering piece of shit that left a trail of victims everywhere he went. And she said people cheered in the movie when they heard that line, because that's what don't glamorize these guys.
Why glamorize?
Yeah, don't glamorize him. He wasn't charming. Even when he got sentenced, it's just one of my pet peeves. When he got sentenced to death in Florida, he had the judge sucked in. "No, I'm sorry this happened. You seem like a nice guy. Yeah, I'd love to have you work as a lawyer in my court." No, he's a chameleon. It's all fake. Everything about him is fake. Yeah. The only thing that matters is his primal urges to kill and to maim people and destroy people.
Like an animal.
He is an animal.
Did you work any of that stuff?
No, because matter of fact,
what year would he go out?
He got arrested for the last time in 1978, and I got hired in 1979. I remember when I went to work in the brand new in the Georgetown precinct, walking in the door, and there was still a wanted poster for Ted Bundy on the wall.
Do you remember that? You got the memory of a steel trap.
Yeah, I know. It was still on the wall. Well, the one when he was executed, I was still a patrol officer. It was in 1989. I was just about to go to detectives, but we didn't have internet or that at that time. And I remember being at the house I was living at the time, and I was down in the basement because I was a third watch officer. So everybody's gone to bed, and I have the radio on, and I'm listening. They're detailing the execution. And then they finally said, Ted Bundy is executed. I turned off my radio and went back upstairs.
You slept soundly.
I slept soundly. I wanted to hear it. Yeah.
Did you work Ridgway stuff at all?
I didn't. No. I mean, I followed up on a couple of tips, but I didn't work. A lot of people I worked around, and friends of mine did. I didn't work the task force ever.
If there was, I remember I had a conversation with you not too long ago, but you were talked about cold case stuff.
Right.
And you said you had a family come visit you one day that you were at HQ randomly, like on a Sunday.
Right.
You want to get into that real quick?
Sure. Yeah. That was, I was really early in my homicide career. And I forgot how, but I heard about this murder that had happened in 1979. Matter of fact, when the murder happened, I was recruited at the police academy. And this girl lived up on Bellevue Court near Belmont Street. And she didn't show up for work at the Red Robin she worked at, which is East Lake and Furman. That was the original Red Robin in the chain. It's not there anymore, but she failed to show up for work. And so they called her, couldn't find her. And somebody finally went to her house. It was the apartment, excuse me, and got the manager to let them in. They went in and she was on the bed and she was bound hands and feet behind her back and strangled and gagged and laying there nude on her bed. And she was dead. And the case had never been solved. And so I thought I should order that case up and look at it. So I called down to the vault, got it ordered up. There's a big box.
So just out of the blue,
yeah.
I want to stop you, but
yeah.
Out of the blue, you just see something and you're like, I should probably take a look at this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. I wonder if something
by yourself up there.
Right. Yeah.
Keep going. Sorry, I was just kind of blown away.
That's why I became a homicide detective. All right.
It's a bit of a clue.
Yeah, no kidding. So anyway, I ordered it up and I started going through the file, and there was some interesting stuff in there. Matter of fact, there was one nurse that UW that was picked up that night by a guy who we now know was a prolific serial killer, not far from this scene. And I thought he might have done it. I should go down. He's in a prison in Oregon. I should go down there and ask him because he's doing the rest of his life. Maybe he'll tell me. But I never got around to it. But there was a couple things. There was a bunch of fingerprints taken. I ran them through the system again. They hadn't been running a few years. Didn't come back with anything. And I thought I'm going to work this case on my part when I have on my spare time. But you don't have spare time when you're working as a homicide detective. You're constantly going from one murder to the next, and going to trial and all those types of stuff. So I just had it there. But at one point, I'm in the office working on something completely unrelated on a Sunday afternoon, and the unit phone rings, and I answer the phone, and there's a man on the other side. He goes, hello, my wife and I are in town, and our daughter was killed several years ago, and we just want to know if we can talk to somebody about it. And I said, is this Mr. Durante? And there was a long pause, and he said, yes. I said, come on up. I'll come up to my office. I'll meet you down in the lobby. I'll talk to you about it. So, I mean, like I said, first of all, normally there's nobody in the office on a Sunday afternoon, right? Normally, nobody's in the office on a Sunday afternoon. I just happened to be there. It was a beautiful day. I remember that. And so I went down to the lobby, and I let them in the building because it's locked up.
Sure.
And we went upstairs, and I put them in a room, and I brought out the case file. And it was, like I said, it was a big file box. And first of all, they were happy to see that it was such a big file. It wasn't this little sliver of a file.
Somebody worked this case a lot and done a lot of work on it. And so I was going through some stuff with them, and I said, we're going to keep working this. We're going to try to get this guy. You never know. I said, we're not going to forget about your daughter. His daughter's name was Sylvia. We're not going to forget about Sylvia. So he's happy. I mean, they're not happy, but they feel good that somebody remembered their daughter, first of all, that they could call and they would tell them who they are without having to look it up, which just happened to be absolutely at random. That's
anybody else.
That's like goes back to this divine thing.
It is.
What are the odds of that happening?
What are the odds of that? Because there's like 25 people working in homicide. And what if any other person had been there, they wouldn't have had any idea who he was. They could have looked it up, but they wouldn't have had any idea. So anyway, so a couple years later, the department formed a dedicated cold case team. And my partner at the time was Greg McSell, and he was going to work that. And I said, Greg, you need to take this case and look at it because I think this is solvable. He said, okay, of course, because he had stacks of cases that he had to work. So, but he did, and eventually he started sending stuff to the lab again. Now, by that time, the DNA had advanced so much. Well, first of all, when in 1979, there was no forensic use of DNA at all. But DNA had advanced enough at that time to give you an idea, which is 1,000 times less than it is today, that they were able to locate and isolate a DNA sample on her underwear. And it was a male, and they put it in the National Data Bank and found out there was a guy in prison, and it was him. And so we started going through the file. Who is this guy? He was never one. Nobody looked at it as a suspect. We found out she was taking a stained glass class, and his name was one of the names on the list of students. And that's the only place his name appeared in the file at all. And so another year after that, the case went to trial, and the Durantes, of course, were there. And I remember at sentencing, they were there, and I walked up to Sam, I think was his name, and I said, "See, Sam, I told you we wouldn't forget about Sylvia." And it really affected him because we solved their daughter's murder. I mean, there's no such thing as closure in murder. That's an overused phrase. But the only thing worse than having a child murdered, well, there's two things worse. Number one, having it murdered and not knowing what happened or why. And number two, not knowing your victim was never found. So they disappeared off the face of the earth. You don't know who they are. Yeah. Or where they are. Sorry. Those are the two things worse. But so at least they got over that hump and they got to.
That's a great.
Now we know who did it.
I mean, that's a pretty cool story.
It is
how
a cool
you
story.
Connected it.
Yeah.
That is divine intervention.
Yeah.
If there was one time frame or one case that you wish you could go back and do over or give it more attention, what would it be and why?
Well, there's a bunch of, there's one case, the most frustrating case I think that I've worked was a murder that happened up off Albro Place, just up the hill on the freeway, like you're heading towards the South Precinct around that bend. Mm-hmm. There was a guy that moved here from Louisiana because of Katrina, and he'd moved here to his family. He was a school bus driver, and he had a friend come out on a nice summer night, and they were sitting on his porch having a beer when two cars pull up in front of his house, right around the bend, and they're in some kind of argument. And so he walks out there and says, "Hey guys, this is dangerous. That's a curve. Why don't you pull over here? You can pull out." And the guy pulls out a gun and just shoots him dead right in front of him. Boom, 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 right in front of his friends and family. And then they get in the car and drive off. Well, the guy, we identify the suspect right away. He's not a gangbanger, but he's one of those guys that like plays gangbanger. He was actually he was an installer for DirecTV. He drove a white Escalade, and he reported that Escalade stolen. Of course, it was on OnStar. They found it just around the corner from where the shooting happened that night. And so we brought him in 3 or 4 times, and he was. As a matter of fact, the last time we brought him in, he told his wife, "Tell the kids I'm going to be gone for a really, really long time." But there was never quite enough to charge him because the witnesses, we identified who the people in the other car were who didn't know him. They were Vietnamese, and they described who he was because they recognized somebody. They recognized the passenger, who they were, who their ex-husband was, blah, blah, blah. And we found that person, and the person denied knowing anything about it, even though we know it was them. So it was never charged. And his parents would call me. They were elderly all the time, just saying, "Are you going to solve our son's murder?" They're elderly parents in Louisiana. And, and I'd say, "We know who it is. It's just a matter of getting enough." And on his birthday, they'd call. Before Christmas, they'd call. And it's terrible. And I know then he left this area and moved to Texas because I got a call from Sheriff Billy Bob in Texas one time. Says, "This boy came in and tried to get a concealed weapons permit, and I saw he'd been arrested for homicide in Seattle. You want me to go get him?" I said, "No." So that's the thing. So I mean, that was the most frustrating because I know who it is. I know he did it, and it wasn't just. Matter of fact, we had big, long arguments with the prosecutor's office that we think we had enough.
Yeah, you figured
they wouldn't.
So to this day, what's the status?
As far as I know, it's still. A matter of fact, I know it's still open because Jason, my old partner, has talked to me about it a couple times. And
God, that was suspicious.
Yeah,
They're just
it's still open, but he'll get his. Something will come up. They'll do some. Matter of fact, we sent. That's a case because we heard about this guy in England who, first of all, in my history, I've never found a usable fingerprint of a fired shell casing. 0. So when they asked me on the defense, "Did you try him for fingerprinting?" I said no, because I've never heard of one.
It's the heat.
Yeah, it's the heat that evaporates it. But there's this guy in England that developed a chemical process. He says it burns into it. And he says, and 10% of the time, he can find ridge detail on fired casings. We sent him our shell casings.
Is that right?
To England. And he tested them, but didn't find any ridge detail.
So you're just trying any
We're
angle.
trying everything. Well, that's what you got. You gotta. You're like just sitting. Boom, boom, boom. You can't think inside the box. What could we possibly do? What's outside this box that we could do weird that would help this case move forward? You just kind of bombard ideas back and forth, and that's the way you do it. Because if you sit and do everything inside the box how it's supposed to be, you'll solve the easy ones, the ones we call our grounders. That patrol arrests them when you get there, before you get there and everything. Or the 15 people. No, that was Frank. He lived down the street. Those are grounders.
Grounders.
Yeah, because it's a nice, little ground ball to shortstop and a nice, easy throw to first and he's out. All you got to do with that is prepare for trial and send it to the prosecutor. But whodunits, those are hard cases, that you don't have any information. I mean, you arrive at a scene. I've done this so many times. I show up at a scene. There's a person dead. I have no idea who they are. I have no idea what happened. I have no idea who the suspect is. And 30 hours later, working continuously through, I'm booking a suspect into jail because I've got a confession and I've solved the case. And that's when we pull out the bourbon of proof around the office and drink some bourbon and all the way around.
So that show that's on A&E, First 48, is that legit? Like 48 hours is like that critical period?
Well, first of all, I don't watch the first 48. People ask me that all the time. I said
I had to ask.
I know, but because I said you work at Boeing. Do you go home and watch shows about building airplanes? Probably not. But it is. I mean, the first few hours are important for gathering up witnesses, identifying things. It's not as important as it was 20 years ago because of technological advances. You can get stuff months or years later on these cases because of DNA and all this other stuff that you could never get before.
Yeah, one of my favorite TV shows is Bosco.
Oh, yeah, Bosch.
Bosch.
I watch very little
and it's like
true crime stuff, but I do watch Bosch.
The detective sign is like, shut up, go knock on doors.
That's exactly right, yeah. Well, the funny thing is, And the sign they have over their thing, our day begins when your days end. We had that in our homicide.
That's so
and their
awesome.
case files, you know why? Because they have LA detectives that are their technical advisors. Their case files, when you open it up to the first page, is exactly like our case files, with the table of contents.
Yeah.
It's exactly. The only difference is Los Angeles Police Department instead of Seattle Police Department. It's exactly the same.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, and that show, I like it. The only thing I don't like about the show is that it's so often like the cops are trying to get each other for stuff. But other than that, it's a good show. I like it. It's more realistic that way.
So, transitioning to like today's modern policing, do you feel as if today's anti-police climate hinders investigations?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no question. You got
why?
Because first of all, if people are uninformed enough to have that position, they're not going to be as willing to share with you everything they know. They're going to be more reluctant to talk to you. I mean, how many times I knocked on her, hey, I'm Detective Steiger, Seattle Police. Yeah, come on in. No problem.
Right.
But if it's some person that for whatever reason is anti-police, they may not be as willing to do that. And because you can still get the information, but I remember having people that I knew stuff about my murder, and there was one of them in the Montfort case, but didn't say, I'm not talking to you. And I said, here's the deal. I can talk to you right now and be out of here in 10 minutes, or I can drag your butt down to court on a day that's really inconvenient for you. You can sit there all day long in front of a judge and tell him what you know. And if usually they go, all right. And so they tell me what they know then, because they don't want to. We go downtown. I'll take you downtown. We can do down.
I don't want to get into too much skills and the craft behind it.
Right.
But, obviously you've got the Miranda.
Right.
And, how would you time the Miranda piece? Was there a certain opportunity? Like, was it immediately, or was it until you developed enough information? It's like, I need to get this guy Miranda. Like, how does that work?
Well, first of all, in order to require Miranda, you have to have custody plus focus. If they're not in custody and they don't think they're in custody, you don't need Miranda.
Got it.
Right. And you have to focus. Focus alone. Like, I know you did it, but you don't know I know you did it is not enough. But if I have somebody like I said, if you bring somebody down in a backseat of a police car that doesn't have handles on the back, and you put them in a room and with a locking door, they're in custody. Whether they're really in custody or not, they're in custody. So what we do with that one, and it's in Washington, it's different because of recording and what you have to do if you're recording and not recording. But all the interview rooms on the 7th floor where Homicide is are audio and video recorded. They're not always recording. You turn them on, turn them off. So we always turn them on before the suspect's there. Suspect goes in. I stick my head in there. I go, hey, need to use the bathroom? That's the first thing. You want something to drink or eat? You hungry? Or can I get you a cup of coffee, pop? And, show you, and yeah, I'll take a pop. Okay. What do you drink? And they'll give me that. And then I'll come in, I'll give them that, and they say, listen, we're in a police facility. We're being recorded. I have to advise you your rights. You've been advised your rights before, right? And 99% of them have. You have the right to remain silent, blah, 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 blah. You have any questions about that? No. Okay. And I leave.
Done.
I'm done. I leave the room, and I'm gone for 15 or 20 minutes. Then I come in with my partner or not and sit down and just start the conversation and start having a conversation. It's done.
And then how close would you get to people?
Well, you start out like you and I.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's
socially distanced.
Socially distanced, yeah. Well, let me tell you what. There is no social distancing in a real homicide interrogation. One of my pet peeves when I watch these shows is when they're interrogating somebody and they're sitting on opposite sides of the table. It shouldn't happen. First of all, because a table is a psychological barrier for the suspect. He puts it between you and him. Sometimes,
shield.
Yeah, it's a shield. Sometimes it's their clothes. They'll pull their shirt up over their face like that. And that's a psychological barrier, right? So, or if you have a blanket, they'll pull it way up like this. So you start out around the corner like that, like we are. And as the conversation goes on, you start out real low key. Well, first of all, there's two things you can do. You either you decide right away whether to lower the pressure or raise the pressure. Sometimes you lower the pressure first, and you're down there for a while. Because first of all, some of these interrogations last 3 or 4 hours, and then you gradually increase the pressure. It's so gradual that it's imperceptible to them. And as you do that, when I say increase the pressure, you're not yelling or doing any of that stuff. It's more direct questioning. It's an intense conversation. They'll tell you, you let them tell you why they didn't do it or what they have to say. And then you look at why that's not true and point out to them why it's not true. And you kind of take
boxing them.
Yeah, you box them
like
in.
a pie.
And as you go, you get closer and closer and closer until when you're down to the meat and to game time my knees may be touching their leg or very close, and I'll probably have my hand on their shoulder, and I'm whispering, or it's not whispering because I want to be able to have the microphone, but I'm talking at a very low rate. This is all you're under. The thing is, you got to tell the truth, because when you go to this, a lot of times what I'd say is, I think this is just a reaction. It makes a big difference. If you reacted and shot somebody or killed somebody, that's a lot different than planning it out and assassinating them over time. And if you don't tell me any different, I have to assume it's the worst. And so
you give them a way out.
You give them a way. And you always got to give them a psychological way out.
Yeah.
You got to give them a psychological way out. And I know you're a good guy, but people sometimes do things that are stress they'd never do otherwise.
What about eye contact? Is that critical?
No,
I mean, I can tell I'm looking at you. I'm like, man, I would hate to be one of your sons. It's like, if I'm lying to you, like, hey, no, Dad, I was not out with her and drinking. To be like,
I got great stories about that. But when they try to lie to me, I'd look at like my oldest son, Casey, they're both, two of them are cops now. I'd look at them and go, do you know what I do for a living? One time, Casey, I don't mean to be on the side, but he asked me one day if he could go with his friend to the Seattle Center, and his grandmother. Okay. And so I happened to be in the office on a Saturday, so I'm driving by the center, and I thought, So I pulled my police car right up onto the center grounds, and I drove, and I sat there and I watched, and I saw him and his friend walking across the center grounds, kind of by the International Fountain, and I just came up behind him and pulled my police car right alongside, rolled my window and go, hey, and they jumped. I go, you just never know when I'm going to show up, do you?
That's so awesome. Psyops all the time.
Yeah. But anyway, and so it gets very intense, and usually, again, you sit the quiver, and again, you don't have to have a confession to have a successful interrogation. If you tell you lies that are so obviously and provably false, that's just as good.
And I'm sure the confessions would have been. Did you find it like obviously liberating for yourself, or was it just like just business?
A little of both. I mean, it is just business, but I mean, I was always happy when I got a confession. Usually, because when you're doing especially on a high-profile case, I might be in the room with the guy by myself, but there's like 9 people on the other side of that mirror. And one of them is a prosecutor and a supervisor, and when I come out, and I close the door, oh my God, they're saying this stuff. Good job, I'm thinking, yeah, thanks. It's what you do.
Did you ever fear for your safety? Like, this guy's a psychopath, and like, holy cow, he's got to take my eyes and gouge them out.
Well, first of all, I've talked to a lot of psychopaths and psychotics, but I mean, I always tell people, you have to practice officer safety skills in an interrogation room. Some people say, don't take your gun into an interrogation room. And I go, oh no, bullshit. No, excuse me. Oh no, I'm taking my gun in the interrogation, because they could take it away from you. I said, patrol officers get their guns taken away. Should they not wear them when they go to calls? Because you just have to practice weapon retention techniques.
You're right. I remember, granted, I was not that great detective.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I remember having my first interrogation, and I was so concerned about that. I left the gun in the desk.
Yeah, sometimes people do. I don't, because you never know. Well, there's an officer on SPD right now whose father was one of 2 Island County deputies who brought a DUI guy in, put their guns in the locker, took them in the back, and they were the only ones without a gun, because he pulled out a gun and killed both of them. That's the thing. So you got to think about that.
You never know.
You never know. But one case I can think of particularly, this guy was a psychopathic killer type, not a serial killer yet, because we got him after this one, but he dumped a body with weird writing all over the body of a woman. But anyway, at one point, when the interrogation was not going well for him, he said, I'm not going back to prison. You guys are going to have to shoot me. And his name was, I can't think of his name. I said, we're not going to have to shoot you. And then back in my mind, I'm thinking, and of course, luckily, somebody got a patrol officer and was standing outside the door with a taser.
Ready to go.
In case this went south. And he goes, and he was rocking his chair. Rocking his chair. You're going to have to shoot me. You're going to have to shoot me. We didn't.
Yeah.
Although I had enough. What I thought was, because he was so full of crap. He admitted he was there when she died, but made up all these ridiculous ways it happened, So I mean, we had enough. And I said, okay, that's good. We'll see you later. And we left. He did go back to prison, by the way.
So you did 22 years. What was your last call? What was your last case?
Well, there's my last call out.
Yeah.
Which is different than my last case, because it wasn't my call.
Let's do call out first.
Okay. It was about a month before. No, 2 weeks before I was going to retire.
Why were you going to retire? Like, why?
Well, because it was like, there was so much crap going on. I'd be in the middle of an important murder investigation, and then we would just stop and go to some PC training that has nothing to do with my job. And it's like, it happened constantly. I'm trying to investigate a murder here. I can't take time off and go to this feel-good, touchy-feely training when I have to do this. I have a job here. But, there's that stuff. Other opportunities were opening up for me. And I was, the phone ringing in the middle of the night.
Gets old.
It gets old. And, the thing is, when I was a young homicide detective, I could work 30 hours straight, get some sleep, and be fine the next day. Mm-hmm. At the end there, it would take 3 or 4 days. I'd be a zombie for 3 or 4 days after that, even if I was getting plenty of sleep after that, because my body just couldn't handle it. But so it was I was on call 2 weeks before I was going to retire, and the phone rang 2:00 in the morning. Guy Pratt, who was then a brand new sergeant in homicide. Yeah, we got a homicide. It was downtown, like at 3rd and Marion or something. So I in my car, I'm getting dressed, and my wife said, "Did you get called out?" Because she always asks me every time I got called out. I go, "Yeah." They go, "What is it?" And I said, "I don't know, some homicide downtown." And she said, "This could be your last one." And I said, "I was just thinking that. I had just thought this could be the last time I get called out in the middle of the night." And it was. But so, I remember going down and driving downtown. I remember it was a windy night. There was the yellow crime scene was flittering in the wind. It was that windy. Coming up there, because it was in the wintertime.
It's windy downtown.
Yeah, it is. And then, I go into the scene, and it was like this guy had been found down. He was transported away by medics. He's not even there anymore. There was one witness who didn't really see it, but he saw the people walk by, and they had a security camera. They actually captured the whole murder on camera. And I was there for like 40 minutes, and I'm standing there, and I walked up to Guy Pratt, and I said, "Guy, there's nothing for me to do here. I'm leaving." He said, "Yeah, okay. See you later." Normally I didn't leave. I'd stay. And I remember getting in my car and driving, and I remember looking up and watching the yellow flap in the wind. I thought, that's probably my last one. So
what's that feel like?
It was surreal. When you're doing it, that was my identity. That's who I was.
Yeah.
So it was really surreal to think it. And then, it was odd. It just felt odd. It was, and so when you leave, of course because I was involved with a lot of other outside homicide stuff, national groups, and things. So I wasn't completely divorcing myself from it.
But you're just done with the routine.
And when you're gone for the first 2 or 3 weeks, it feels like you're on vacation, right? Like you're going to come back, right? But you're not. Yeah. So that's kind of after a while, it kind of gets on you. And then you get your first pension check, and it's like, yeah, I'm not coming back.
Yeah, I hear you, man.
Yeah. So it was surreal, and it's a change of identity.
So you're doing the cold case stuff on the side. You're writing the next book. What's the next book? Can I ask?
I don't have a title yet, but yeah.
What does that next do?
Well, I don't know for sure yet, but it'll probably be about a year from now, I imagine. It's going to be about more than one case, probably 3. The first case that I chose it because it was a Seattle police case. It happened in 1974, and I knew a lot of the names of the detectives and people in it. A lot of them are gone now, but I knew them. Mm-hmm. So it was that way. And some of them were still around.
Bit of a connection.
Yeah, I have a connection. And this guy, it was a terrible case. This guy was a violent rapist, and he did a rape in one in the U District and one up on Capitol Hill. And he got convicted. And instead of sentencing him to prison, they thought that violent rapists could be treated in the 70s. And it was kind of more of a suspect-oriented. Get a hint, like we're going now. Mm-hmm. All the stuff's on the suspect, not as much on the victims. Yeah. So they sent him this program down in Western State where they kept violent sexual predators to treat them, to cure them from being violent sexual predators. And in reality, there is no cure for that. But matter of fact, coincidentally, a friend I have is a forensic psychiatrist down in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was talking to him about it. He goes, "I did my residence, and I was at that program." He said, "I thought I was a young doctor, and I thought this is a time bomb waiting to go off. These people shouldn't be here.
Wow.
And what this guy did, they would let you leave campus. This guy left campus and just didn't come back. Well, he showed up in West Seattle, and in February of '74, over a 2-week period, a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old girl went missing. And eventually they found the 13-year-old first, right off of Charleston and Fauntleroy. And And a week or two later, they found the other girl, the 15-year-old, off Andover, off of Avalon Way, both in brush, and both have been murdered. And so they didn't know who'd done it. And it was a long story, but this guy, in the meantime, he'd gone down to Oregon, and he had raped a 13-year-old in Oregon. Didn't kill her, just raped her. Got arrested, gave a phony name, and was in jail down in Washington County, Oregon. And for some reason, somebody up here heard that this guy, there was a fugitive warrant out. So a fugitive guy called down. Matter of fact, one of them was Mike German. Called down to Oregon and said, "Hey, we hear that this guy, his name was Rizika. James Rizika is in custody in your jail." And the guy who answered the phone, who was like 7 months on the sheriff's office, because that's what they did. They stuck you in the jail, right? And I interviewed him. He's still around. And he kind of, after I sent him the reports, then he remembered the case. He looked, he goes, there's nobody here by that name. And then he hung up. Well, then he started looking. He goes, oh, wait, this guy gave a Seattle address. And he's been making a lot of phone calls to Seattle. So he called that guy in. He goes, I don't think that's your real name. And the guy goes, okay, my name's Jim Rizzuto. Well, the address he gave was like a half a block from where the 15-year-old's body was found. So people put two and two together and go, this guy might be the guy. And so there's this big, long investigation. And then they found evidence that on both scenes, he was staying with his ex-wife up on Andover, and stuff was missing from her house. It was found at both scenes. The knife was found that matched, that they knew was the right knife, and it all fell together. But that's the first one. And it's like, just stupid people killing stupid people for no reason. And little girls, it's outrageous. Yeah, these people have.
Imagine what their the last moments must have been for them.
And now, how about their parents? Yeah. They just disappear, and then all of a sudden your little girl's dead. Oh my God! I mean, this little girl one of them was a middle school or junior high student. Had no problem. I'm going to walk down to Hancock Fabrics by the West Seattle Bowl and get some stuff for school, and never comes home. And the other girl lived. Her place was down at Luna Park. Matter of fact, her house is gone now. It's parking lot right next to Luna Park Cafe. She had an argument with her sister about what to watch on TV, and she says, I'm going for a walk, and walked out the door and never came back. How do you think her sister feels? The
randomness of that.
It's absolute random. And none of these kids were prostitutes. None of them they were normal.
Quality human beings.
Young teenage girls.
Everybody's a quality human being.
They are. Everybody is a quality human being. I always tell people, because you get it all the time, everybody, whether they're the worst criminal gangbanger in the world, has got a mama, and his mama loves her.
Right.
And you're working for his mama. That's what you say. Yeah, you're working for his mother.
And to tie it into politics here, and we're going to wrap it up.
Okay.
It's like, that's the false narrative about just policing right now. Right. Is that we don't care. I'm tired of it. Oh,
I am too.
And that's probably what led you to start.
It is.
Really moving away.
Yeah, when the pendulum was starting to swing, I could see it coming. I one time I had a murder like that of a young street guy, and he was killed. He was a gangbanger or something. And it was his mother or somebody said, I know you're not going to work on this because my son was a gangbanger. And I said, ma'am, if we didn't work on gangbang cases, we'd have nothing to do. I'm going to work on this case just like everybody else's. Yeah, I'm working on this case just as hard. Matter of fact, you work harder on gangbang cases than you do on any weird case because nobody wants to talk to you. You have to pull teeth to get information.
That's right.
And do that stuff. So you work twice as hard on those cases. Nobody goes, oh, no, it was only a gangbanger. Let's leave. That doesn't happen.
And that's the tragedy with this is like this hyper focus on policing now, and it's based on a false narrative.
Absolutely false.
And the people understand that just talking to you, man, I could talk to you for hours about this stuff because it's fascinating. But what I really get from you is this spirit of just being the advocate for people who have been violated by violent crime.
Yeah, you have to. Well, who else is going to do it, right? You got to do it. That's the thing. If I was a victim, one of the best compliments I ever had was an attorney who told somebody else, and it got back to me, that if me or my family was ever murdered, I want Cloyd to investigate it.
So awesome, man. If you were to give some people, the audience here, some advice on just policing or just career advice, what would it be?
Well, policing is not what a segment of the media and society would have you believe. And I don't think it's a majority. I think the majority of people understand. But, you think you don't like the world with police, so you're really not going to like the world without them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they won't have people like you working those
right. People will die and nobody will care.
And the randomness of being at HQ on a beautiful day on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And you start working something that's cold, and then
Boom.
out of the blue,
Yeah.
they call you, and then
yeah.
that's the human connection.
Right.
And so for those activists that completely immerse yourselves into throwing shade at police, shame on you, because there's good quality human beings that do this job.
Yeah. Almost 100%.
Cloyd Steiger, I'm looking forward to the next book. And we're going to have you back on. We'll go through one of your books and just really get into one of these cases, because it's fascinating to me, man.
Sure.
I look up to you. You have a storied career. You're a legend. And I think people are really like this this podcast.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Cloyd Steiger.